Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. This is another update for my big table OO9 narrow gauge model railway. I thought I'd make another video today because there's been quite a bit of progress over the past few months. I've had a bit of a tunnel disaster as well. And of course you'll get to see all of that and more in today's video as I explain the journey I've taken over the past several months with this. And you'll get to see as well what my future plans are for it and how close I am to completing it. So we're looking at here the double failure, which I just recently picked up, and it's just hauling a nice load of passenger wagons along the layout there, as you can see. So there's been a lot of progress indeed. So let's dive right in and get into it now. Now I should start off by saying as well, if you haven't checked out the previous update number 1, go ahead and check that out now. I'll put a card up above and go and check that out. You'll be able to see the humble beginnings of this layout from way back when I was still laying the track. Update number 1 video that came out in November of last year, and here I'm showing you some stills from that video as well from all those months ago. A lot of the landscapes have now been basically covered with landscape materials and slate and foliage, but the foliage part of things is not fully there yet. On the right hand side of this layout you'll notice that there's a bit of a yard setup, engine yard, and got a few sidings there as well. So that is more or less the completed side of this layout, the right hand section. And you'll see on the left hand side there's still a ways to go there. There's still a lot of bare baseboard kind of showing. As you can see, I have actually started on the station platform and I've got a little car waiting for us there as well. I'll go into all of that in just a moment, but yeah, this is more just an overview, I guess, of the layout. You can see that I've done a lot of the landscape covering when it comes to the ground cover, but the foliage aspect of things, there's still a long way to go. I want to fill this thing up with trees and more color to reflect the North Wales region. Right, but let's go back to the start a little bit and we'll basically carry on from where we left off in update number 1, where we were basically just looking at a sea of foam, styrofoam, and I was telling you how I was sick of looking at foam. So yeah, following that last video, basically I was head down and started to apply the scenery materials. So as you can see here, a lot of the foam was starting to get covered up with the plaster bandage, and so I started applying that quite heavily actually, in such a way that obviously I ended up with quite a realistic look for the mountains and hills and some of the inclines that I've got on the layout as well. Now once the plaster bandage was dry and basically rock hard, it was time to start applying color to the layout. So that's where all the washes and dyes came out. I used a lot of the earth colors and the green as well to basically simulate a little bit of undergrowth on the layout before I started adding the actual static grass and whatnot to the layout itself and all of the lichen. So what you're seeing here though is well before the static grass, so still adding all the slate covering to the foam and to some of the plaster rock that I've got as well against some of the rock faces, as you can see there. But here you can actually see the actual static grass starting to come down on some parts of the layout. So you can see here I've started to add the static grass to some of the hills and mountains and whatnot, and you can see that it's very much a learning process for me as well with this static grass. This was actually the first time I've used static grass on any layout, so yes, I did learn a few things. I did shock myself once or twice, had a few little live flashing before my eyes moments, but still here, still alive and kicking for now. And so the next step was to add a little bit of slate, some realistic slate to the layout. So I had some slate rocks, I guess, from a local garden store that I picked up, and basically just scattered them all throughout the hillside, as you can see there. And I think the effect actually turned out pretty good, and I was actually quite pleased with it myself. And it really started to bring the layout to life at this point in time, and I just think it really makes the landscape pop with all that realistic rockage, I guess, if that's even a word. And yes, I did actually set all of this in place with some PVA glue mixture, which I just mixed up in a syringe and basically just applied to set everything down in place so it's solid. And yeah, if you touch any of those stones and things like that, they're not just going to shift around, they're all frozen in place basically. So yes, very happy with the way that turned out. And so after that I shifted my focus to the other end of the layout, where basically I needed to build up a little bit of a hillside just to frame off the end, the foreground, I guess, of the layout there that you're seeing, and made quite a mess there with the foam. And yes, that's what modeling is all about, isn't it? So basically put the foam down with some glue, set that all in place, and then start off with the plaster bandage once again, and adding that to the new hillside that I was rapidly forming up. So as you can see here, this is the elevated section of the track. It's based on a bit of a cardboard base, so the track actually lifts up a bit as it goes around this curve. And you can see here that I've got the plaster bandage down. It's rapidly setting in these photos here. So this would become rock hard basically once complete. And you can see here just a few status photos of the layout itself at this point in time as well, with everything kind of making its appearance. You can see here another view of the rocky hillside as well, and the city side here, as you can see. Now you'll see in these photos too, I was smart enough to block off the tunnel entrances just to keep any foreign materials out of the tunnel, because that's the last thing you want when you have a tunnel like this, which is basically inaccessible. So I'm foreshadowing heavily right now, but I will get to it. I did have a major tunnel disaster, and that is still yet to come, so stay tuned and we'll get to that very shortly as well. Right, so next in the chronological order of development of this layout is the engine yard and the slate processing building, which we've just flown over as well. And here's the engine shed and water tower as well, which I put in place. Let's circle back to the slate processing building though, and just talk about that for a little bit. In the last video, this was just a prop that I had on the actual layout, and since then I've actually 3D printed and built my own slate processing plant, and because the real one that you can purchase from the stores is way off the charts price wise, so I figured I've got a 3D printer or 2 or 3 these days, so why not make use of the 3D printer and print out some lovely building materials and the building base, and basically assemble it all together. Now what you're seeing here is the slate processing building, and this is actually for sale. If you have a 3D printer, feel free to check out the link in the comments below, in the description below, to the slate processing building. You can go ahead and purchase the 3D model for this and build it all up yourself and paint it, finish it like I've done, as you can see here. And you can have your very own slate processing building for a very cheap price, and it'll be yours, and there'll be nothing else like it in the world, depending on how you finish it. Don't paint it exactly like what I've done here if you want it to be unique. Anyway, so yes, that's one of the 3D printed objects I've got on the layout, and to be honest with you, there is quite a bit of labor involved in placing every brick one by one and every roof tile one by one, as you saw there in some of those earlier development and build photos. But I think it was definitely worth it, and the slate processing building has turned out very nicely, I think, on the layout, and it's definitely a nice unique little addition. So this is the engine yard, as mentioned, with the water tower, and I've put a little coal bunker there with the building, the crane. All of these are purchased off the shelf. There's a little shed as well off the shelf. There's our lovely slate building, and there's a few of the sidings as well, as you can see. So yeah, the engine yard and slate processing building, I think I'm happy enough with that area, as you're seeing it right there. Put a little truck there as well. And yeah, I definitely had fun finishing off that little area. There's probably just a little few bits and pieces to add, but I will just quickly mention these point levers, or these switch levers, which I've designed and 3D printed, and these are actually available for sale as well, for purchase if you wish, on my 3D printed page, the COTS 3D page. I'll put a link once again to these as well if you want to check these out and purchase them. You can print them out on your 3D printer, and you'll have yourself some nice manual points, because I couldn't find any manual points to operate in this scale, so I thought, why not just design my own. And once again, 3D printing has come to the rescue, and I'm quite happy with the way these point levers have turned out. I've put them pretty much all over the layout, so there's no automated switching, I guess. I haven't gone with any point motors or anything like that on this layout, for better or worse. Everything is just manually controlled. And before we move on any further, just some quick photos of the water tower, which I assembled and weathered, painted, and decided to pour a bit of resin easy water into as well, just to simulate a little bit of water effects inside the water tower in case anyone wants to take a peek inside. I thought that was a nice little touch. And speaking of resin water as well, once I had a little bit of practice with the water tower, I turned my attention to the end of the layout here and decided to build basically, well, make a bit of a cute little stream, I think, beside the rails with the easy water, basically just pellets of resin that you heat up on the stove. Managed to get this all kind of sorted out. And this is a one pour and kind of pray, hope it goes okay kind of process. So yeah, I got everything kind of poured in, poured the resin onto the layout, and together with this little bridge that I constructed as well, just out of bits of wood, we ended up with a nice little stream that's flowing alongside the raised section of the layout. And all was right with the world, also I thought. So basically around April this year, after I'd poured the resin, I decided to take a little bit of a break from the layout, and the weather here in the southern hemisphere started to cool down as well. So one dark stormy night in June, I decided to start the layout and enjoy the layout for a change and just see how everything was going. And I was promptly met with this, a derailment in the tunnel, which turns out I couldn't figure out for weeks and weeks after looking and looking from every single angle, shining a light in, shining a bike torch into it to try and just figure out for the life of me why the train would just come off the rails at a certain point, just inching along millimeter by millimeter even at a very slow speed. The locomotive would just come off the track and there was nothing I could do. I tried to brush it from the outside. Maybe there was some debris on the ground, on the rail. No such luck. Actually got to a point where I decided, you know what, I'm just gonna have a horseshoe layout. I'm gonna block off the tunnel. It's gonna be a thing. The layout is a living thing, and unfortunately during the construction of the layout, the tunnel has been condemned, and I was actually ready to even 3D print some steel wrought iron sort of gates for the opposite side as well, and just kind of block off this side with the foliage that you're seeing here. So it was actually quite depressing, I must say, and it stayed this way for several weeks while I figured out how I'm going to get into the tunnel without completely destroying the lovely work that I've done so far on the tunnel and the layout around it. It ended up being very depressing in the end, and I actually abandoned the layout. I was ready to just leave it be for an indefinite amount of time because I just wasn't sure what I was going to do. The layout was effectively broken in my mind as well. Having a horseshoe run wasn't ideal for me, but yeah, I wasn't quite sure what to do. But eventually, end of July, I pulled out the Dremel and I decided I'm gonna just have to break my way into that tunnel and see what's going on. And I chose the least intrusive manner to do this, using a Dremel, I know, but I thought I'd cut my way in from the side instead of hacking away at the top of the terrain and ruining all my static grass and all that kind of stuff. And so yes, I started the process of hacking away. I guess you just get to that point where the curiosity and the drive, the determination to just fix the issue becomes too much, and you just have to do something about it. And this is me doing something about it. So eventually I made it into the tunnel from the outside, and I could see that the outer leg, so the rail closest to the camera, was basically stretched for some reason, had pulled itself free from all of the chairs or fixtures on the sleepers. And this was, I think, because of temperature change, but also probably because of bad soldering. I had soldered that rail and it had too much tension in it, so it had nowhere to go, and so it just pulled itself straight. Okay, and so basically there was no chance of fixing this without hacking into the tunnel, which I ended up doing. So hacked in, 3D printed out some 9mm gauge spacers, if you will. And before I did this as well, I did unsolder and reflow the solder at the join. So the solder that you can see closest to the camera there, you can see already it's been kind of reflowed, and basically just spaced up the rail and restored the gauge, I guess you could say. Now from here, obviously I can't run trains in this picture because there's the spacers just protruding up from the rails themselves. So I had to figure out how I'm going to restore the profile of this rail and restore that curve for the outer leg. So basically what I did was head into Fusion 360 and I decided instead of using super glue to glue the rail back together, I'm just going to put these spaces in, and the rail is going to be loose-ish and able to just move and flex in future if it needs to. But yes, after 3D printing these spaces, I threw them in, and you can see here that it actually worked out quite well. And the moment of truth came when I started running trains again through the tunnel, and I'll tell you, it was such a good feeling when access was once again restored through the tunnel and I could run a loop once again. That was a very good feeling indeed. And yeah, it definitely made me glad that I had the drive, I guess, to get into that tunnel and just sort this out, because it wasn't going to fix itself, that was for sure. So yeah, glad I did that. And the good thing with this now is I've fashioned a little bit of an access cover, if you will, which is basically just some paper napkins that I've painted black, spray painted black there. You can see there on the end of the layout, and they're just being kind of screwed, literally screwed in with some small wood screws into the plaster bandage. And I can basically unscrew it any time to remove the napkin and get access back into the tunnel if need be. And I also spray painted the inside of the tunnel black as well, so that it would be less visible when looking from the outside. It would be way less visible that there was an opening there. And it really drilled home the fact for me as well that I should have allowed for tunnel access during the build of this layout, because that's just what you do, isn't it? That's best practice, and I didn't do that. So now I was paying the price. Murphy's Law, if there's going to be an issue with your tracks somewhere on the layout, 99% of the time it's going to be in the tunnel, just because Murphy's Law says so. So with that obstacle and challenge finally out of the way, I decided let's focus on the left side of the layout as described before. That was very much bare baseboard up until very recently. So I decided that I would get going on the station platform. So basically, rather than use the smoothed road surface and plaster and all that kind of stuff, I decided maybe there's a better way, a quicker and easier way to kind of get that nice concrete look. And this is what I ended up doing. So basically just using cardboard and a little bit of masking tape, PVA, and some paint just applied there to look like concrete. I actually think it looks fairly realistic with the tape texture, helping the concrete kind of look a little bit rough and whatnot. So these are still very early progress photos as well, mind you, so I'm not quite done with this surface just yet, but I have started also on the car park surface. So I started to paint that with a little bit of the pigments, so just used a bit of black paint there. And I think with the addition of the little Range Rover from my other layout, my first layout, the card up above, you will hopefully agree that it is coming along, and it's starting to look like the beginnings of a station and platform and car park area. There's still heaps to do there. Got to do station building, fencing, pot plants, all sorts of stuff, people, more cars, all that sort of stuff. So I think we'll wrap it up here, folks. I'm just conscious of time as well, hitting that 20-minute mark now. So I think you'll agree that there's been quite a lot that's been happening since November last year. Rolling stock wise, just got some final photos here just to finish off the video. Have picked up some slate wagons recently to allow my little Blanche locomotive to actually pull some realistic load. The quality and fit and finish of these things is just perfect, and they do definitely roll along the tracks very well with very little friction. So, and as mentioned, got the double fairly on the layout as well. Lovely locomotive that thing is. She runs very well, very smoothly. And this layout is a DCC layout as well, I should say. So for those of you not aware, I think DCC really suits this layout well, because I can run any locomotive at any time, just switch the IDs on the controller and away I go. So yes, very happy with the way it has turned out so far. Got some more running footage here, might as well use it. Sorry for the slight afternoon sun glare there. This is 040 Blanche mainline Hunslet locomotive, pulling the slate load down from the mining track and returning it back to the engine yard slash slate processing building where it will be further processed. So yeah, my plans are for the middle section of the track there, which I haven't really talked about too much in this video, I must say. So this middle section here, which is still largely incomplete, this is where the mining track is. I intend to have a bit of a slate building here as well, I guess, a slate workers building or some sort of site office or something, where workers will be processing the slate, and then they'll do the final dressing in the slate processing building back down the hill, if that makes sense. So I've still got a bit of work to do. As you can see, I've got to build another bridge here and got to figure out what I'm doing under the bridge, whether that's going to be a bit of water or a stream or something, not too sure. It's going to have some rocks down there, some slate that's fallen down in there, not too sure. I do want the bridge to look very cheap though, because the mining section of the track is very low budget. It's meant to be low budget in real life, so yeah, still some work to go, but I've been making a lot of progress, I think you'll agree. Lots of plaster and lots of foam and plaster bandage. And also in addition to that, I used quite a bit of sculptor molds, which is basically just paper mache almost. Or not really paper mache, but kind of ground up paper and plaster. And you can basically shape it any way you like using your fingers. You basically just get it soaking wet in water, and then you apply it to the landscape, and it dries up rather fast actually, and then you end up with a rock hard kind of finish there, and it does really good to kind of simulate rock faces and things like that, as you can see here. So I've used it here for the embankment where the mining track is raised up. That's all sculptor mold there as well. Okay, I think finally that's enough. I'm going to sign off now. Thank you so much for watching. If you've made it this far, really appreciate your viewership, and let me know what you thought as well in the comments below. You know what to do. Please like, comment and subscribe if you haven't already, if you're enjoying this type of content. Your likes as well on the video really do help me with the algorithm and try and get this video out there. This took me quite a while to put together as well, so hopefully you enjoyed it, and share the video if you think others might enjoy it as well, and I look forward to catching you again in the next video.